okay, this is like every graduate that messages me,
Right.
and you probably.
Yeah. How possible is it for new computer science grads with no Japanese to get a job in Japan?
Yeah,
Um, Basically, yes, it's possible, especially if you're coming from a top university. Um, no, if you're coming from like a small Inaka Regional
yeah,
Polytechnic college that I went to,
yeah.
and you're ranked like 7,000 on the Times list of universities. So, um, there are Japanese companies that will go out to like the IIT in universities in India, Indian Institute of Technology, sort of the top tech in universities in India, and do new grad hiring.
Yeah.
Do open days, interview, and bring over. I remember one Japanese company hired 50 people from a few of the
Mm.
different universities. If you did your bachelor's at MIT and your master's at Cornell and you're job hunting, companies are just going to be interested. Again, it's going to be a smaller number because without the Japanese,
Mm.
those you're unlikely to get hired by Hitachi and into a domestic Japanese department. Um, then the question is, if you've got that kind of education, can you afford to come to Japan with the student loans you've probably got and other stuff like that? But
Oh yeah.
recently I know one startup here, sort of small 6 to 8 person engineering team, but hired a new grad, good university from China, and then had done a master's in a very good university in the US. Super smart, fantastic communicator, and they brought in as a sort of a new grad hire, even though they weren't necessarily looking for a new grad hire at the time. But the resume kind of stood out. But it's not that common
Mm.
again. And yeah, for me, sort of my university and stuff wouldn't get anyone
Mm.
interested, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd prefer not to show my polytechnic that I went to. I'd prefer not to. I'd rather just say self-taught. Anyway, that's a different
So
story.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's overseas now. Japan, traditionally, hiring here was all new grad hiring direct out of universities.
Mm.
You interviewed in third year, you got your job, you spent your fourth year partying it up because you had a job lined up. So new grad hiring is a big thing in Japan, but hiring people from overseas for new grad is still reasonably limited.
Yeah.
In many respects. Some companies will go to like Boston Career Forum and sort of do new grad hiring places like that. So that's organized by Disco, which I always thought was a great name. And I think it's once a year. I think it's still, I think maybe April or something, November. But it's kind of a new grad hiring, and you get some of the Gaishke foreign companies here would go overseas. And sometimes they're picking up Japanese who've studied overseas. Others, it's maybe people with language skills or strong interest in Japan. But for I think the average new grad just sending off resumes, again, companies not hiring for potential; it's generally hiring for
Yeah.
experience.
And I think the next one's kind of for me too. The next one is because
Is
I've
this
been
your
working.
your career path? Is this your career planning?
Oh yeah, it's just trying to think. Can I get into that? Can I get that FANG money or that Gaishike money? But because I've worked only mid-sized Japanese companies. But I mean, in the end, it's the same. It's all the same code. I'm writing the same.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
the question is FANG or Gaishike, like foreign these large foreign companies, possible for a dev in Japan who's only worked mid-sized local companies? Is this a negative to show this on your resume?
Yeah, I don't think it would be a negative. So first of all, I think it definitely is possible. I've seen people do it. Um, FANG and your regular Gaishke kind of insurance company, there's a big gap, right? There's
Okay.
quite a big gap in expectation. Um, Everyone piles their resumes into Google and
Hmm.
Amazon and everyone else. So again, you're looking at how to stand out from a crowd. Again, that's making sure that you're highlighting you're here, you've got experience. Speaking Japanese can be a big plus in those areas as well, and good at a good engineer. For other Gaishke, again, often they're not getting a lot of CVs for their roles. And
Hmm.
so if you've got the skills and if you've been working in Japanese companies, many of the in Gaishke companies, most users on the business side are Japanese.
Yeah.
Um, the foreigners tend to be in engineering and technology. Um, or perhaps senior management, if it's an international company, back office, operations, HR, accounting, very often Japanese nationals, sort of bilingual Japanese nationals as well. So If you saw an interesting looking role at like a Gaishke insurance company or asset manager or pharmaceutical or whatever, then I think you'd have as good a chance as anyone at getting into them. The screening, yeah, would they be like, oh, you've not worked in a foreign company? Probably
Mm,
not, because if you're looking at your name, they're thinking, well, this person probably can work with
yeah,
a wide variety of different backgrounds and cultures. So get them in here. For FANG, it's more difficult. There's a lot of social proof in having get all these ex Google, ex Amazon on LinkedIn,
yeah,
these kind of things. It's like kind of a social proof thing. I was good enough to work there, so I'm good enough to work for you. Or let's
yeah.
take a shortcut and just talk to me anyway. I think it can be more difficult to get noticed at the big tech. But again, I think if you sort of apply to roles where your background fits closely and you're already here working in Japan, I still think you've got every chance. So, you know,
So
Tyrone's Google is a possibility when they start hiring again.
yeah, yeah. I think they look at my YouTube channel. They start seeing the memes and stuff. They go, "Oh, this guy's trouble. We don't want this guy part of our team." What's that?
Google owns YouTube. You could be fine. Google owns YouTube, right? So
Oh yeah, yeah.
just say I'm making good use of your services.
Because I just wonder, like, there's a lot of engineers in Japan who are foreigners who are just in those mid-sized companies and who are really decent engineers, but maybe they don't feel good enough, because there's a certain aura or social circle that
Yeah,
they're just not a part of that.
yeah. Again, yeah, I think so. People sort of feel there's the type, and it's that sort of
Yeah,
person with the MIT degree and that kind of stuff. I think a lot of it is how you present yourself when you apply. You got to have a great resume. You need to be sort of showing that you've done interesting work and you do it well. I think it's difficult. For example, if you've been working at kind of like a mid-tier vendor doing lots of small projects for customers,
mm,
and these projects are fairly sort of cookies or fairly reasonably simple,
yeah.
then they kind of thought, can you come in and work on our, massive multi-transaction per second, search engine kind of stuff is, perhaps a gap. But I think there's a ways to prepare for these kind of things. And, one thing agents can do is promote you as well.
Yeah.
Whereas, I've had cases where the client said to me, on paper, I'm not that interested. And I said, well, I had lunch with the person yesterday and they're brilliant. Just
Oh
have a
wow.
half an hour call and check them out. And if I've done a good job of building trust and they have that half an hour call and they go, you know, okay, you're right, let's get them in. Resumes are dreadful representations of people and job descriptions are
Yeah.
dreadful representations of jobs. So unfortunately, we're kind of stuck with that at the moment. Hopefully we get past it at some point, but that's kind of where we are.
I want to clip that. That's a great I don't know, quote. That's your quote. I like it.
That's my quote. Yeah, that's TM.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I probably won't because I'm freelance and I like my freedom, but we'll carry on.
How common
Work
is remote hybrid
conditions.
work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How common is remote hybrid work in Japan? I'm guessing because there was nothing like this, I guess, like 15 years ago, I'm guessing. So it's all,
Yeah. I mean, when I got to Japan, it was sort of like pre-broad. It was dial-up internet, right? So,
yeah.
everyone who did anything in IT in Japan was in Japan. There was no one overseas. You couldn't dial in. Just so it's very very different. COVID really accelerated the idea of remote work and hybrid here. I think before pre-COVID, it was uncommon. Now, perhaps a little bit common at companies that were a little bit different, sort of like startups and others. If you're a startup, office space is expensive. You're signing
Yeah.
2-year contracts, guarantors, deposits, and all this sort of stuff up the yin yang. So work from home is great, until you
Mm,
get up on your feet. So I was having a look at something recent. I think it was a Nikkei survey that had recently that was sort of said in tech, about 40% of Japanese tech workers were back on site. So
mm,
that means 60% were hybrid or fully remote. Um, Out of that, I would say hybrid is much more common.
yeah.
And probably 2 days per week is the most common I've seen out of that. There is some 1 day a week, there's some three, but two seems to be pretty common. Um, I would say full remote, um, it's a great sort of way to attract people if you're a fully remote company, because You're getting people from Osaka and
Yeah.
Hokkaido and or Tokyo, but they'd like to go live in Osaka or Hokkaido and things like that. So the companies like the Makaris and Paideys and
Yeah.
these that kind of offer these kind of full remote, I think it can be quite beneficial to them. I guess some of these other questions sort of roll into that.
Yeah.
So the companies in Japan allow you to work while living in another country once in a while. So I've seen it at fully remote companies. Um, Common question is, why are these fully remote companies saying I have to live in Japan? And primarily it's for tax reasons. I think they need you to be they don't want tax liabilities overseas. So you're Japan based. They don't care Hokkaido, Okinawa, or whatever, but you're local. But I have seen people at those types of companies going away, overseas for a month, 2 months, even longer. So sometimes it's just like a planned summer holiday. I'm going back for a month. Everyone's great. Just, can you jump into these calls, whatever? There will be a stand up. Can you jump
Mm.
into it if you're going to be working from remote? I remember one person who was I'd introduced to a role, and it was kind of like, this looks great, but I probably can't start because I'm getting married in like 3 months, and I'm going to be going
Mm.
home for like 6 weeks for the wedding. And I said, let's talk to the company. And I talked to the company, and like, well, if you can start work for us here. We're full remote, so they can get onboarded up to speed, then go home, work remotely from there, then come back to Japan, work remotely. So it was no issue for them. In other like hybrid or sort of fully office based, it may be sort of case by case.
Mm.
If you've got a sick family member and you're like, listen, I need to go home and take care of somebody. I don't want to resign. Can I work? And if the company's sensible, and they'll
Yeah.
say, yeah, and maybe give you extra holidays or what have you. I did talk to someone fairly recently that wanted to go work remotely from home, another country, because of a sick family member, and the company was like, no, and they basically said,
Mm.
well, I'm sorry, I got to resign then, and that was kind of the end of it. And then 4 months at home, person was better, they could come back to Japan, but now they're job hunting again. So
Oh.
yeah, and to me, it's just like, how short-sighted is that company, because now they've got to go
Yeah.
find somebody. It's sort of like, I don't know what just to me it
Mm.
just seems mad. So yeah, I would say, just summarize, fully remote companies tend to be quite flexible. In other cases, case by case. And I think as long as you're not staying out away long enough to be sort of affecting taxes and stuff like that,
Mm.
companies tend to try to be flexible.
Yeah. 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 I think, yeah, I'm freelance, but I work with some of the Japanese, like, there's a lot of big companies in Shibuya, and they do the 3 or 2 day a week work
Yeah,
days. It's real Japanese companies, right? So
yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah,
seeing
yeah.
too.
Even so. I mean, for me, I'm mostly working in that English-speaking space. My wife works for a very domestic Japanese company, sort of logistics, import, export, chemicals and stuff. And they're 2 weeks, 2 days a week, office-based. You can pick the 2 days, doesn't, and you can shuffle it around any way you like. So if it's a
Yeah.
20-day month, she can just do 8 weeks in a row and then 12 days work from home.
That's cool.
So it's kind of very, very flexible. For some reason, someone decided, again, someone said, we need to be in the office 40% of the time, and that's kind of where it is. But very surprising that Japanese companies like that have gone for that flexibility. But keeps people happy, easier to hire people. Makes sense.
Okay. So the next one is, I think we'll skip it and we'll just do the next one first because it's about
Okay.
remote work. We'll go back to the
Yeah.
freelance after. So,
Yeah.
the future of remote work in Japan, do you think they will make it full? I can't imagine that everyone will go full remote, but how do you see the future of remote work in Japan?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a really good question. I think maybe someone had sort of said crystal ball time
Yeah.
on your chat for that. So I guess what I feel now is that sort of things have stabilized. We're sort of in that post-COVID. Companies sort of have decided their policy.
Mm.
Most companies have got a policy in place and this is what it is. So we're either fully on site, we're hybrid, we're full remote. Um, so then the question is, then what would shift things either way, one way or the other? I think one thing we're seeing is there are more and more startups starting up,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of interest, VC money coming into Japan to do that. Those new companies, I expect many of them or most of them would be remote first
Mm,
companies, fully remote. Again, for all the reasons of not being tied to office space and flexibility and other things like that. So, and if those companies then continue with those fully remote policies as they grow, you could probably expect, a lot in that kind of English speaking tech scene to there be even more fully remote roles than there were in the past. If it goes that way and takes off, then the pressure then is on the other companies
mm,
to adapt. If, for example, people are leaving and saying, "Listen, I'm just moving because I'm going full remote, and that's the only thing that's making me quit my job. I
mm,
like here, the salary's fine, the bus is great, but I have more flexibility." Will that push companies then to kind of change things? So at the moment, sort of equilibrium point, I think, but I'm kind of optimistic that there can be more opportunities to grow the
mm,
fully remote space. Um, Also, local governments are trying to promote more remote work because the countryside's hollowed out.
yeah.
So everyone moves to Tokyo and Osaka and the big cities. So you've got local authorities offering free houses to people, free housing to bring their families to Wakayama or wherever it is. And I think, again, people are going to start looking at those more favorably as they get more used to being able to get things done remotely too. So I think there's a good chance that we see it opening up more. The other way of do I think it's going to go more back to the office full time? I don't think so. I think
Mm.
there will be always companies that have an office first kind of way of dealing with things. But again, I think for every one of those that starts, there's probably 10 that, are kind of full remote or hybrid.
Yeah, that is interesting. That so I'm when I freelance, I tell the clients I'm full remote, but to be honest, I don't know if I had my own company and I'm trying to make something great, like a startup. I don't know if it's a, you know what I mean? Like, would you want to be around people and huddle face to face? It's kind of a tricky one there because for me, I like it,
It,
but if I had my own team, I'm like, bro, you guys gotta meet together and you know,
it's it's that, and that's something that I often see kind of debated on LinkedIn. Someone to put it this way, if you have two competitors, one of them is five people and they're all together in an office 5 days a
yeah,
week. Another is five people and one's in Canada, one's in Albania, one's in wherever. Who are you most worried about as a competitor? And
yeah.
the vote was, I'm worried about the people, all the on-site team, because they're
Oh,
they're they're the together team. But
yeah,
then it's like, which would you rather work in? It's like, well, I want to work in the fully remote team.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
so, I don't know the answer to that debate. I think it's something to be studied, but I think it's still early days. I see the benefits. I primarily work from home. We have an office. For me, it's going to offices to see people.
yeah,
It's not because there's anything I can't do work wise. I can send a resume from anywhere with an internet connection. So, for me, it's seeing people and having conversations and building relationships and those kind of things. So even there are fully remote companies where it's sort of teams so almost self-organize to go
mm,
to the office like 1 day a week or half a day a week, because they want to hang out and get to know each other.
yeah,
Maybe they go for lunch and then they're doing that, but there's no requirement to be in the office, but they sort of thought this is perhaps a good way of getting to know each other, and again keeping it very, very flexible as well. Again, not a requirement, but so some people may say, listen, I can't because I'm too far away. Other people then say, it's nice to get to know people. So, yeah, I think we're still very early days, a couple of
yeah,
years into this whole thing to sort of see how it's going to go. But, it's exciting times.
yeah. Yeah, it is, but I don't think I'll ever want to go back to the office. But yeah, I never know.
To, for someone who spent 5 days a week putting on a suit and getting on a rush hour train, squashed up like a sardine,
Yeah,
that was just the way it was, right? And
yeah,
then
yeah,
that's like, I don't have to do that. And
yeah,
it's like, wow, I don't know if I even have a suit that fits me anymore. That's in
yeah,
like decent enough condition to wear out of the house. So yeah, once you've tasted a bit of freedom, it's hard to kind of go back to for me anyway, the full office based experience
yeah.
is just, yeah, no thanks.
So now the freelance topic. So that is something I've seen lately. This trend in Japan of freelance. I don't know how big it is and uh, how much effect it has on the what you see day to day.
Mm-hmm.
But do you see this trend increasing, or is it you see more Japanese engineers? Like, I think it's almost like if you become a freelance engineer, maybe they feel like I'm not a proper like shakaijin or something. Like
Right,
it's
right.
a strange. I'm not a proper a worker in society. I'm a like a some
A little bit of an
no-name kind of
outsider.
outsider. Yeah. So how do you
That's
see
it.
this happening in the last?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, I think definitely. Again, companies don't ask me to find freelancers, so it's not something I'm sort of
Yeah.
actively involved in. It's something I just sort of see by talking to people. So I think last 4 or 5 years, I've noticed more engineers doing freelance work, and a few different ways. One, if I'm on LinkedIn looking at profiles, I see more Japanese people who've quit their jobs, and I know the profile is now freelancing since whenever,
Mm,
and sort of again, particularly the younger, there's a generational shift in Japan. The people in the 20s and 30s, the good old days of lifetime unemployment, these are stories from their parents and grandparents. These are not
yeah.
things they've experienced themselves, so they're not tied into that. And attitudes have changed. So I was kind of surprised. It's like, wow, here's a Japanese person freelancing, and then I go find another profile, and then I'd sort of like, what do you do? Get nosy and say, oh, I freelance for companies in the US.
Mm,
And like, how do you do that? It's like I found the job online, and they pay me in dollars, and that's nice if the exchange rate's good. But maybe Japanese skills were required for a company that was localizing or doing some work,
yeah.
and they were just sending off their monthly invoice, doing their taxes and what have you here, and kind of all is good. And I think it's a more common question I get asked by people I'm working with. If I'm interested, if I'm introducing a full-time job, is does this company allow me to do side work? Can I do
Yeah.
some freelance work? So again, the topic it just seems to be a lot more common. So I think it's growing. Again, I don't sort of have a sense of the scale. It's
Mm,
sort of I talk to these. It's anecdotal. I talk to these individuals, but for me, it seems like it's growing. And then you're seeing the platforms coming out, the Levitech and all of these kind of
yep.
things. Switch on YouTube and it's IT engineer. Why are you
Yeah.
slaving away at
Yeah.
this domestic company that's horrible to you when you could be off doing your own thing
Yeah.
and conquering the world for much 3 times the salary? And that's sort of last 1 to 2 years, I think. I'm seeing
Mm.
these adverts, TV as well. It's not just sort of YouTube, and
Oh.
it's big time sort of domestic Japanese TV spots as well. So there's obviously money getting into that. I think Macari has their freelancing platform. I think it's been
Mm.
launched. I'm not sure. I think it's been launched, which I think is it Macari Hello. It's not sort of
Yeah.
just a tech focus or anything
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but there's things like that. So again, once you see people getting into providing the picks and shovels, the infrastructure,
Yep.
then you're gonna kind of see that that's out there. And I think on the company side, it makes sense for companies. Japan is a land of vendors, so obviously there's a
Yep.
lot of companies, they don't have their own internal people. They're
Yep.
using system integrators, vendors, and other things. But if they can, for smaller work, if they can use a platform to hire a freelancer, then and again that's a platform from a company they trust. They're going to look at it and use it, even if it's just improving. Sort of, there's a lot of old legacy code out there that needs work. So I do think it's kind of an expanding area.
Yeah. That is in my case. I know that because I'm using Levitech, and I know what they're paying me is great, but I know they're getting their end of they're getting their
Oh
end
yeah,
of the
there's a
deal.
commission. Yeah,
The-
yeah,
and uh, and I'm thinking the company I'm working at, I'm pretty sure the engineers in the company don't get paid this, because it's too expensive. But they
yeah,
just need me for 6 months, then I'm out.
exactly. Yeah, but basically, companies will be, let's say, happy. They'll
Mm,
understand they're going to need to pay a premium for
yeah.
flexibility. And if it's someone to
Mm,
come in for 6 months, do something and leave, because they can't hire someone, they can try and find a direct contractor, go through all of that kind of stuff themselves,
yeah.
get HR involved and do all of these kind of things. But again, are they going to find someone? What's this person doing that they're available to go and do this
Yeah.
6 month job for them? Again, the person is going to expect a premium as well. On the other side, the internal team have got job security, very
Yeah.
difficult to get laid off,
Yep.
and all of those other things as well, which is kind of somewhat perhaps a trade of
Yeah.
security for salary for people in that position. So yeah, I think a lot of companies will be looking to short-term solutions and resources to get particular things finished, bring outside expertise. We don't have anyone who knows Android or
Yeah.
whatever. So bring in someone 6 months, 3 months, a year, and understand it's paying a premium, but still perhaps cheaper than a full-time employee.
Yeah.
Who, after that project's done, is now what we're going to do with them. So yeah, I think it's only going to grow.
Yeah. And I'm happy because I get paid well, and I just look up the next project and just jump straight on. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
But of
yeah.
course, I don't I
Also,
don't have I have to do my taxes myself. I can't get a mortgage. All those kind of stuff. Like
yeah,
it's
I mean, you're basically a one person business, so you've
yeah.
got all the things that you're away from not just doing your work. You've also got you've a back office and a front office. You've got sales and
Yeah.
administration that you've got to do, and that's the price of the flexibility
Yeah.
as well. And but again, if what you want is the freedom to do that, I think there's also a lot that can be gained sort of technically as well of working in different environments.
Yeah.
And having exposure to different people, different technologies, tools, frameworks, things like that as well. So, yeah, I think it can work out well. But you've got the instability. You got to file that taxes, or there'll
Yeah.
be big trouble and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff too.
So the next one is I have a lot of experience too, not just freelancing, but the what we call black companies. Do they still exist, and what do they look like?
Yeah.
You've been here. You've seen quite a bit of this, right? Since the early 90s,
So
sort of early
essentially,
2000s.
I guess I'm sort of aware of it. But I sort of avoid working with these companies, so
Okay.
I'm not sort of directly involved. If so, what's a black company is? So I think it's like Byakukigo, I think is in
Yeah.
Japanese, but they're basically sort of like companies that exploit their workers. So long hours, poor salaries, missed bonuses, harassment, various labor violations, all of these kind of things. Do they exist? Absolutely. A lot of companies in the sort of last decades have been on,
Mm.
they've not been doing well, and that's kind of rolled downhill to just bad treatment of the employees. Now, not every company that does badly automatically thinks like, let's take it out on everyone, but in some places it's that's how it's kind of turned out. So, so they do exist. I think they're generally, I would say, um, if you speak Japanese or can get someone to help you, you can pretty much find out a lot about them online.
Mm.
The government does publish, if they fine companies for violations, that information is made public. Labor unions will often publish stuff if companies are in violation of labor laws and that kind of stuff as well. And you'll get just the sort of the gossip of things as well. Obviously, gossip is gossip. Sometimes people complain about things because they're just getting their own back and someone they didn't like.
Yeah.
But if you see enough of those red flags, then I think that's the thing. Is the company you're applying to a black company? Difficult to know,
Mm.
but I would say again, look online, try and do research. Try and understand like company employee turnover, salaries. Again, typically it's bad salaries. Glassdoor used to be great, sort of in the English speaking area, because you would get the anonymous reviews of, the CTO at this company is bananas, don't work there. And then
Mm.
you get like 27 of these and they're all like, I agree with the last person. And then you were like, yeah, I think that's probably somewhere, I could probably avoid. For Japanese companies, it's a bit more difficult because, again, most of this information is going to be in Japanese, but I think a lot of it is online. Just be careful for research. It's not just someone, competitor trying to, dig a competitor and say bad things about them. Kind of look at what the source is and what kind of information. And if you're talking to them, then, talk about turnover and other things like that. Unfortunately, stuff like power harassment, stuff like it is a common part of very domestic companies,
Yep.
because they've got a very top-down way of running things. So, so people it goes to their head of some people, not everyone again, but some people. And job for life, there's sort of protection for people as well. So you'll talk to I know friends and there's one sort of person, one manager, and we just avoid that person because
Yeah.
they're just, you don't want to be dealing with them. Go talk to somebody else instead if you've got problems or things to deal with. So yeah, but yeah, still around. Just do your best to try and avoid them.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't want to, in a not in a, maybe it sounds a negative way, but it is kind of connected a bit with culture as well. So, like some of the things they do, you just couldn't do that in New Zealand, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Again,
just it's
there's a
cultural stuff too.
people. So it's not like every Japanese people are entirely happy about all these things either. It's
Mm,
just that not a lot gets done about them sometimes. So someone goes to complain about to HR, nothing happens.
mm,
So the person affected is, okay, so now am I going to leave? What am I going to do? How am I going to resolve it? Am I going to just deal with this person directly, even though they're 2 levels up? And, I shouldn't, I'm not supposed to talk to them. So, people get put in these very bad situations. And I think one thing that's probably, just better in the time I've been in Japan is people do change jobs more often. It's
mm.
not job for life, which trapped you in one company. And so, there's a lot more possible for people to say, this place sucks and I'm going to take my talent somewhere else that will appreciate me better. So that's perhaps only only good thing of change over the last sort of 20 years. Yeah. So this is someone with after someone has 1 year of experience as a developer, what kind of salary can they expect with changing jobs, or should they wait later, like a year and a half, 2 years before leaving their first developer job? So, um, that's there's a lot of aspects to this question. So, first of all, I don't know what kind of salary you have now. So you have 1 year in a very low paying company, or 1 year in Google and you're getting very highly paid, moving out from there is going to be very different depending on where you're starting. Let's say this person has got a very typical, like let's say 4 million yen or something like that, and a
Yeah.
year's experience. You're probably not looking at a huge jump.
Mm,
Unless are you doing something that's very are you have you got like native level Japanese and the year has been in like generative AI or something like that? We're like super niche and super employable and super niche. In general, I think, most companies would want to give you some more than you get currently, but it's probably not going to be an awful lot because, what they're going to say is like, what have you accomplished in a year? Starting off from, sort of being very entry level. So I think sort of 1.5 years puts you in a better position. 2 years puts you in, even better position. 2 years, you've probably gone through performance reviews a couple of times. You may have had some raises even, but you can probably point to, work achievements during that time. So now I would never say to someone, stay in a bad environment longer than you
mm.
need to. So if you've been bullied at the workplace, or you wake up in the morning and you dread going to the office, or you dread getting onto the Zoom call with your boss, these kind of things like that, then I would say, yeah, by all means, get out and having a look. But, getting a big bump in pay is probably not something that's probably realistically going to happen. Changing perhaps from, sort of like a domestic Japanese environment to a more international environment, there's typically a premium just working in English, for example,
Mm.
in more international environments that, even for doing the same role. So you could kind of get some bumps like that. But I would think, I would be surprised if someone's like doubling their salary,
Mm.
going 4 million yen to get 8 million somewhere else. You're After a year, you're typically looking at kind of smaller increments. I would say sort of 2 to 4 years is when people moving around tend to have bigger jumps uh, from what they had in the past.
I was in my first Japanese venture company. Let's say it's a mid-size with good contracts to large companies, and my first income was like 27 a month. So that was my first job, and then it took me 2 years and a half, and then the I don't know the yearly, but from it took me nearly 3 years to get the 500
Right. Yeah.
right? And that was only
Mm.
because I was leading two other engineers. But for me, I was my third year of my, and I thought, oh, this is awesome. This is a lot of money for me, from an ex-English
Yeah. Yeah.
teacher. But then, after I started to look around, I go, oh wow, But it wasn't. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't just big jump. It was just gradual, and depending on my responsibilities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So big jumps are possible. Again, moving responsibility, moving to the different types of company. There are companies that pay a lot better than other types of companies, industries that pay a lot better and other things like that. It's just that 1 year mark is so, you're still being, it's an area, it's an amount of experience where if you were overseas, people still wouldn't be particularly interested in you.
Yeah.
And kind of like we're not going to bring over someone who's got 1 year.
Yeah.
So you're still at that sort of area. So for that person, if you're in a miserable time, then by all means job hunt and look at improvement. But if you're like, I like everything else, but my salary is low, then I would say you probably can get a better jump with a year and a half, 2 years experience under your belt. And
Yeah.
just more companies interested in hiring you. So if you get multiple offers, then now you can negotiate as well. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah. And then, this one is connected. So if someone quits their job and finds another, you're in a, when would the situation be? You're negotiating your income. So is it true? And I've heard this, that they can ask you for your previous income statement.
Yes. So they can ask.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you have to actually give it to them or tell anyone your previous salary. So, but this is sort of around the kind of like how Japanese companies hire and what people expect and don't expect. So, so there are things that companies can't ask you. There's sort of laws around basic anti-discrimination, right? So the Constitution, you shouldn't be discriminated on age or gender or religion, other things like that. There's the Labour Standards Act. There's, I think, one or two Employment Equality Acts and things like that. So if someone sort of said, Tyrone, thanks for coming in today. What's your, who did you vote for at the last election?
Yeah.
Can't ask you that. Are you married? Can't ask you that. Now, companies ask, many interviewers have not been trained and haven't got the first clue about what they can and cannot ask or say. And so, you may get asked things that they're not supposed to ask. And, that's sort of, unfortunately, poor training in those respects. Things like salary, they can ask, what was your previous salary? You don't have to tell them. If you don't tell them, that's probably going to sort of finish the process. Because generally, this is sort of a HR box ticking kind of process. We tick, 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 tick. And they're like kind of, and what would you make last? Tick, we found out. So, of course, your fear is I'm badly paid. I tell you my bad salary, and you think, we'll add 10% on and we'll get them in a slightly better bad salary.
Yeah.
And are there companies that would do that? Absolutely. Is this a smart way for companies to hire? Not particularly. So I think when it comes to salary, and I think one question is, how do I bump a low salary?
Yeah.
I have no sort of issue saying like, this is my previous or current salary. Because at the very same time, I'm going to now make very clear my expectations.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to say I make 4 million yen and that's the end of the conversation, because now it's just up to them to randomize some number and come back to me. So I'm saying, my current salary is 4 million yen. My expectations for a new role are 6 to 6.5. Let's just say you've done your research. That seems to be a sweet spot. And I'm basically going to say, I'm underpaid in my current role. I've been researching the market. I've spoken to recruiters. I've looked online, and this range is, the other jobs I'm interviewing for are in the range of, 6 to 6.5. So that's my expectations. So if you're working with a recruiter, they should be doing that for you. You shouldn't have to be, shouldn't be in a situation where you're negotiating. That's what the recruiter's being paid to sort out. But it's very dangerous if you just leave it at like kind of the past, because if you were very happy with it, maybe you just stay where you are. And if, some companies, people are being paid very poorly, below the market rate, right? So you don't want that as the anchor. So you always want to anchor onto your expectations. So, and some companies, it's a box ticking exercise, and they go, tick, fine. Our budget for this is 7 to 8. So, the least we give you is 7 because, we have grades, and this is a job at that grade. And if you qualify for this job, that means that's what you're worth to us. That tends to be the bigger companies, more organized companies with salary grades and other things. Smaller companies tend to be a bit more seat of the pants, and less sort of structured. But again, smaller companies, you probably able, maybe you're talking directly to the CEO or CTO. You can talk about
Yeah.
expectations as well. And again, with all negotiations, having options is important, and not being afraid to sort of say thank you, or this isn't right for me, if you don't get what you want as well.
That might be a good thing for many engineers, is that they're not comfortable with that negotiation of how much I should make, and then maybe the recruiter can go, "No, you're not. You're worth more," or
Yeah.
I'll look after that for you, because I even for me freelancing, I kind of feel nervous to go, I'm worth this much an hour. It's quite of a scary thing to ask.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, we should have the information from the client of what their budget. I would never work on a job unless the client tells me their budget range anyway,
Yeah.
because how can I introduce someone then when I don't know what, salary is very important for people, right? And so that's important to me. And there's things I can say as the recruiter. If you said it, it might annoy them, but
Mm.
it's okay for me to say it, because that's just like me annoying them slightly, and it's not you. And so I'm kind of like, I think that's going to be a bit low. If I'm sort of talking to you and you're like, I'm not really looking at that, I can kind of push back and say, listen, what can you do to improve that? Or look at ideas, or sign-on bonus, or just try and figure out ways to get around things. I think sometimes people are afraid that if they do the hardball negotiation, then it's going to kind of taint the relationship they have before they even
Mm.
start. Not necessarily, but again, I can understand where people may not be that comfortable. And if someone's not used to changing jobs, then these are conversations they're not that used to having.
Mm.
You don't want to lowball yourself either, and not leave money on the table as well. So agents should be that person that's kind of making sure that everyone's needs are being met and everyone's happy. But if you're doing it yourself, I think just do your research, what's out there, apply to multiple roles, understand, ask them what their ranges are. And you get these kind of wacky ranges, whether it's 3 million yen to 30 million yen.
Yeah.
So, for someone with my experience, what do you think would be typical? Then
Mm.
kind of reframe. And, but again, I think for me, it's kind of like, these are the expectations. And I like to get that done at the front, at the start, so that
Yeah.
everyone isn't wasting their time. The worst thing is where someone gets right to the end, hours of interviews, doing technical take-home assignments, and then it's like, here's 3 million yen, and like, well, I make 7 now, and I'm looking for 8. It's like, oh, we just thought you were probably making 2.8, so
Yeah.
not good for anyone. So
This is what I wanted to know. Like, I'm not going to make this much, but what are some of the highest paid, like, engineering jobs you've seen, or some American company, venture company, or FANG? What do they look
yeah,
like? And what do they look like? What are they doing?
yeah. So if you're sort of for non-manager, so sort of a senior individual contributor, then sort of 20 million yen plus, 20 to 25, 20 to 30. Yeah. Again, it's typically sort of big tech, or the companies that are competing for the people that Amazon and Google and those are hiring. And there's been sort of several companies that have been kind of in that space where they've had sort of high ranges. 20 plus for being a sort of hands-on is it's individual contributors. Not that common, I think, in most. Interesting, if you go to Open Salary and just sort of bang in something, and then you get the kind of the nice normal you get the distribution of salaries, and
Yeah.
you get this kind of like a whatever bell curve, whatever it is, and you've typically got the sort of the Japanese domestic companies at one side, and then you've got the sort of the English speaking, the Gaishikes International, the other, and then you have a gap, and then you've got the 18, 19, 20 million,
Mm.
and then you kind of pop open the actual list of things, and then you have a look, and it's Google, Indeed, it's a sort of a small number of these kind of companies. So it is possible. It's not that common. I don't know how much now perhaps is stock or things like that,
Mm.
or bonus, variable compensation. If you're in banking, sort of, building trading systems, if you get like a decent level in that, then sort of decent bonuses bases in the mid to high teens plus bonuses on top. But still hands-on engineer type of work is possible as well.
Just a
Um,
quick one on that. Have
mm,
you worked with someone how you're able to bump them up significantly? Po-
um, I
Is that
don't
is that
typically,
common?
yeah, I don't typically work with FANG, so it's
Yeah,
not like I'm getting someone out of one and put them into Google and there's that kind of
yeah,
bump. But, I think, sort of getting increases of 25, 40% can be quite common.
yeah,
Again, for me, it's all, again, like, aiming, researching very carefully on the market rate
yeah.
and then aiming the conversation at that market rate. And so, again, for people on that who are at that lower end, then sort of saying, let's shift you to the middle of the higher end, then
Okay.
you can be getting, 20%, 40%, 50% in there as well. So that's definitely possible. And I've done that for sure. I was going to say they're the fun ones as well, because, someone who makes 20 million and they get 22 million yen, it's not necessarily a life-changing experience for them. But if
Mm.
someone's making 3.5 and now they get 7, that's a big change to quality of life,
Yes,
right?
yes,
One of my favorite was a guy, young Japanese guy, working in a very domestic Japanese company as a C programmer, 3 million yen. Part time, he was a yakitori waiter, restaurant waiter. That's where I met him, and he was working part time to pay for English classes. And I was just in eating yakitori. He started having a chat, and he said, "Oh yeah, this isn't my real job. I'm a C programmer." I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I need extra money for English classes, and I'd just been asked to find a C programmer." And a month later, 5 weeks later, he had a new job, double salary from 3 million to 6 million yen, paid
nice.
English classes, a month in the UK at head office, and that was 2001. We're still friends,
Yeah,
20 something years later. And that still to me is like, I love that, because that was a life changing thing for him.
yeah.
He was working 300 hours a month as a developer, sleeping on a cot in the back of the
Jeez.
office often, and then yakitori in the evenings to pay for his English class. And 6 months later, he's like, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm going to get married now.
Yeah,
Life, like totally different life, which that's for me, that's what it's all about. And that's brilliant. So, unfortunately, I'm not doubling everyone's salary
yeah.
regularly. But, you can get good raises if, depending on the circumstance. So,
Well, it is. I think Japan is quite realistic, though. That's the part. Like, I think people see stories from like some Western country. Oh, I made this much after 1 year at a boot camp, but it just doesn't. That's just news headers. It's not reality.
yeah, there's a lot of outliers. The outliers making the news, right?
Yeah,
It's the one thing that did that, and it's I studied 2 hours a day, and now I'm a multimillionaire with this
yeah,
system. So, most Japan is a lot. There's a lot of stuff in Japan like around the middle.
yeah,
Most things are, and if we can improve the middle, you're going to improve things for a lot of people. So,
yeah.
mm.
True. And then the last one: should one negotiate at their company or find a new job like every 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think I guess it really depends on what you're trying to kind of optimize for. If it's for salary, you're more likely to grow your salary moving around every few years, because the new company's very likely to give you a raise to attract you to the new company. And I think 2 or 3 years is, in Japan is fairly acceptable. I wouldn't go and say I move around every 2 years because I want to bump my salary, because then people are kind of looking at you as a mercenary, even though we're all working for money, right, at the end of the day. So, um, I think then the question of negotiating my current company or move, I think then comes down to like, how much do you like what you're doing and your current company? If you really like what you're doing, if you really like the people, if you have a good relationship with your boss, you're getting promotions, if you feel your salary is weak, then my first thing would be to try and negotiate. And again, research, come in. Sometimes companies do not very proactively give people pay rises.
Mm,
So it's often even if they appreciate or say they appreciate what you're doing, it's not the companies, generally the manager is not being rewarded for giving people pay rises at random to kind of like make people feel good. So you may have to just sort of drag it out of them. But I'd prepare, I'd list the contributions I'm doing, where I've come from, what I've got to, and then the recruiters are telling me I can get X if I change, but I'd really like to be here longer. What can you do? And for some, a lot of companies are like, wow, we didn't think about it. We thought everything
mm.
was fine, so we didn't see any, it was just status quo for us. So I think if you're very happy with what you're doing and you like it, no reason not to try and get a better deal where you are. If they can't do that or they won't do that, again, not every industry has Google's money in the bank for these kind of things. So maybe then it's time to look out into the market as well.
Yeah, that's true. I also realized that I think we think everything's set in stone, but you can always just talk to your boss and talk to someone in charge and go, what? Not even just money, just saying, oh, I want to do this or this, and they go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. You can try it out, and we'll fund it or look after it, and it can become like a kind of a Kogaisha, kind of the subsidiary. Like there's all these types of things
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can just talk to
yeah.
someone in the company, which I
Mo-
didn't
mo-
realize you can.
Most people there's an inertia of just continuing with doing tomorrow what you did yesterday and today. And so you've really got to sort of like poke that with a stick if you want to get past it. So things like salary, things like promotion opportunities. Hey, listen, I'd really like to run one of these projects one of these days. And like,
Mm,
oh, well, I didn't think you'd be interested in that. Again, people can assume a lot about you that's completely incorrect. So
yeah.
don't ask, don't get. And if you're asking and it's very reasonable and you're just being like, oh no, we're not interested in this, we're not interested in that, and just getting nowhere, that's probably the signal that you're bumping off a kind of a ceiling in what you're likely to learn or progress in that company, and then maybe getting out into the market is the right way to go as well.
So, everyone, thank you for watching this. We might make this into two parts, it's quite long. I think a lot of these questions I wanted to ask myself, and it's always good to hear from a recruiter directly. You got to just not my opinion, because there's, everyone's around and they have unique experiences. So, thank you so
Mm.
much, Paul, for you taking a lot of time out of your busy schedule to teach us a few things about working in IT in Japan.
Well, again, first of all, thanks for inviting me. Great fun. Always great to catch up. And yeah, hopefully there's things here that can help people figuring out life in Japan, work in Japan, in tech, and other things like that as well. So yeah, more than happy to contribute and to the Devipo community and keep growing.
Yeah. So, how can people reach to you or reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can hit me up. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone. So find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Paul Roberts. There's no beard in the profile picture, but so you'll find me there. Or have a look at my blog, paulroberts.jp. All this one word, Paul Roberts, and there's a contact form there. There's also articles. I got a newsletter where I sort of like once a month. I kind of do a job market update, other things like that. But I'm always happy to talk to people of any level of experience. My career, I owe a lot to people just taking the time to tell me things and answer questions, and I'm more than happy to do that for anyone else. So yeah, thanks for today. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. I'll link everything in below, and yeah, I'll see everyone next time, and see you soon sometime, Paul, with a pint or something.
Sounds good. We'll catch
Okay.
up. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.